You're as beautiful as the day I left you. I've been meaning to say this for a while, but I hope you stay with me forever.
Yes!
What are you doing?
What?
I'm talking to my power rack. The most important decision you'll ever make in life is purchasing a power rack. And it also can be a little bit overwhelming when you start thinking about the fact that every company makes one of these things or 48 variations of them. Then you start thinking about size, attachments, the near limitless options, terrible naming conventions, and the fact that many of these companies' offerings are somewhat compatible with other companies' offerings. Well, it can be a bit much, which is why I've created this video, my ultimate buyer's guide for power racks. So join me as I slowly fall apart and scream at the camera off scene. Come on, man! Mother, god damn it! After endless hours of filming, editing, and research. A good rack, if not the most important part of your home gym, is definitely the center of one. And regardless of your fitness goals, and those goals and your lifting style should play a factor in what power rack you decide, but the vast majority of people are going to benefit from having a power rack. Not only because of the versatility they provide, because you can work inside and outside of them, but you can also add on to them to your heart's content. I should note that this video is focusing on full power racks, not half racks, folding racks, or other options. Not that those aren't viable, but this is already too much to fit into one video, so I had to cut somewhere. This video isn't so much on what is the best power rack, though I do cover a lot of great options later on. It's a guide on how to choose a rack and what to look out for. I can't possibly cover all the rack options in one video, though the article on our website will be updated and expanded so you can check there for a lot more options. I apologize if this gets less entertaining as it goes. It's not that the quality or the jokes have faded, it's just that I'm slowly losing my sanity. So let's get started. Maybe the number one reason to have a power rack is because of the versatility they provide. There's no single piece of equipment that affects your workouts more. Okay, you could argue you need plates or a barbell first, but without a power rack, you're really limiting what you can do in your home gym. Bench, squat, overhead press, crying about that useless Titan product, rack pulls, dips, pin press, and the list goes on. All right, looking back, maybe safety should have been the number one reason for wanting a rack, because not everybody has a Winnie to spot them. And even though she's a beast and I have full trust in her, I also have a rack to back me up in case she decides to check out her butt in the mirror while I'm disappointing myself with that weak squat. There's a lot of options to weigh when choosing a power rack, but I would try to find one that's modular. That is, it's designed to be added onto. And typically, if they're backed by a good company and it's well developed, you'll have an almost overwhelming amount of options down the road. You want to add 2 more uprights and make it a 6-post? Why not? You want to build off the side? You want to have a lat attachment in there, or 70 other options. Not good enough? Well, if you pick the right one, you can mix and match from other companies and the options are nearly limitless. One of the limiting factors of your rack is going to be the space it goes into. Now, it sounds dumb to say, make sure it'll fit. But I mean, not just the rack itself, you need space around it. Around 10 feet is pretty good for a width. You can get away with a little bit less, but it's gonna be a little bit tight. Now, not just that space though, hopefully you have space to expand later on as you realize that this is more of a disease than it is a hobby. I'm just kidding. I really need those 15 barbells, and you will too. So you'll have to decide, do you want a 4-post or a 6-post? The difference mainly being that those 2 posts in the back are normally used for plate storage, but who's to say you can't store those plates in a different way? What about height? How tall do you want your rack? My R6 is 90 inches tall, and that's a little bit short for me, but if I get it any taller, then Winnie's gonna need a box to get up there. So how much vertical space are you working with? Are you in a basement? Do you wanna do muscle ups? There's a lot at play there. You also have to consider the depth of the rack. The main part of this one is 43 inches, but you put those other 2 posts and those plates on the back, you're talking about over 7 feet. And then throw the platform on the front that you can't actually see right now, and that's a lot of space. I love it, but do I need it? That depends who's asking. But there's a lot of other options, 24 inches, 30, 36, and the list goes on. We're gonna spend a little bit more time on size here, and that's not just because every man is obsessed with how big his rack is. There's other factors at play here as well. You've got to consider the gauge of the metal, and as we know, I like them thick. The thicker the steel, the more stable the rack, but honestly, many racks are really overbuilt for home gyms. 11 gauge steel, which is 1/8 inch thick, is probably ideal. 7 is over the top for a home gym, and 12 is okay, but I definitely wouldn't go lower. It's not as much about weight capacity, though as a standard, I probably wouldn't go below 1,000 pounds, but a bigger, beefier rack is safer and more stable. If the gauge isn't listed, they're probably hiding it for a reason, and I'd look elsewhere. You also have to consider the tubing size, 2x2, 2x3, 3x3, and there's others, and the hardware size, 5/8 inch, 1 inch, or whatever, because those two numbers are going to dictate what fits on your rack and what other companies are compatible with your rack. Now, for the most part, we can probably all get away with a 2x3 rack like this one for a home gym, but there's a lot of reasons many of us go overkill with a 3x3 rack. The choice to go with a 3x3 rack for many of us is because that's what the industry is pushing and innovating with. If I keep my 2x3 rack, I can't get straps for it. Actually, I can't get a lot of stuff for it, but if I go to 3x3, my choices are overwhelming and glorious. Besides that, take a look at my dip attachment. It only fits inside or outside, but I'd really prefer it to go in the front. 3x3 racks are also much more modular. You can build off in any direction and have a lot more freedom. Not only does the weight and the size of the rack matter, but can you anchor it to the ground, or do you even need to? Do you want or need a rear stabilizer? What's the build quality like in the welds? And by weld quality, we don't necessarily mean pretty, though that's a nice touch, we mean solid. Does the company offer a version that doesn't need to be strapped down, or maybe they have front foot extensions? But besides that, what about spotter arms, drop safeties, strap safeties, or pin and pipe safeties? You need at least one of these to truly utilize your rack, but if the only option is so clunky, you're more apt to not use it, then it should be avoided. And then you'll want to consider hole spacing within the rack, which to some extent is going to dictate how easy it is to place things within it. Winnie's heights and mine are pretty different, but we're both able to find some comfortable positions within this rack. Do you want west side hole spacing, which is 1 inch spacing in the bench region and 2 inches everywhere else? Like this rack, a Rogue Monster Lite or a Rep PR 4000. Or 2 inch spacing like a Rogue Monster or a Rep PR 5000, and there's a lot of others, and those racks are gonna have 1 inch hardware, but they're gonna have equally spaced 2 inch holes on the side here, which gives you a lot more versatility in attaching your accessories or building off in that direction. 2 inch spacing is perfectly fine and workable, but I'd ignore any company that has spacing greater than 2 inches. Are you getting overwhelmed yet? Don't worry, we're almost done. Well, not really, but we are getting to the fun stuff. It's just not this one. When you choose a rack, you're gonna also wanna consider the interior and exterior dimensions of the rack, especially if you're going with a 3x3 rack, because that extra inch is either gonna go to the inside or the outside of your rack, and there's pros and cons to each. Let's say you put that extra inch on the interior like a rep rack. Well, the con there can be that when you're racking some specialty bars, it can be a really tight fit. Versus a Rogue rack where you put that extra inch on the outside, giving you a total exterior dimension of 49 inches. Well, if you have a crappy walkout like Winnie, who bangs up all my stuff, but I still love her for reasons. And then some of them, their fancy folk, have numbered holes on their rack. Is it necessary? No, but it sure is pretty and convenient. Not that my paint pen doesn't look professional and super cute, but take a look to see if the rack you're looking at has them, or at least has an option to add them on, because even though they might be a little bit frivolous, they're a pretty awesome addition. And then one of the more exciting parts of picking your rack is your finish options. Some racks and companies, they only have a black powder coat, but many companies have a ton of options. You got Cerakote, ground clear, you have stainless steel and various colors of powder coat. And the most controversial part of picking a rack, where it's made. But rather than debate the politics of being made in America or China, because I'm not smart enough to understand that fancy talk.
Are you stupid or something? I'm as stupid as stupid does.
Just know that most of the big companies are still US based, and while you can definitely save money by going foreign, that doesn't necessarily mean that all US products are inherently superior to their Chinese counterparts. Well, this is awkward. Maybe the most fun part about having a rack is dreaming of bankrupting your family as you slowly purchase add-on after add-on. So make sure whoever you choose has what you need now, but also what you think you'll want in the future. As a bonus, if another company's attachments will fit on your rack, that's a big deal. So as an example, I can use these Titan roller J-cups on my Rogue rack, even though this is a metric system versus inches. But as a generalization, they do fit, especially if you only need one hole. So this will go in perfectly fine, but in that conversion from inches to metric, the second hole doesn't always line up. So that's something you want to research and take into consideration. As a base point, make sure your power rack comes with a pull-up bar, or hopefully there's variations you can choose from. And if you can add a dip attachment and a landmine later on, that's really nice. When it comes to J-cups, it's fine to have these standard ones if they don't have the UHMW in the front, but you're gonna grind away on your bar there. Preferably maybe a sandwich style or a roller J-cup. And really whatever ecosystem you decide to live in with that company, just make sure they're gonna have enough options to keep you happy, because really it's gonna be kind of a fun thing to build on as you go. The other major limiting factor besides the size of your rack is gonna be your budget. Essentially, how much are you willing to spend? You can easily spend under $1,000 or very easily spend well over $5,000. And since every company makes a rack, the real limiting factor is going to be your wife. Budget. So what's a realistic budget? Well, you could spend a couple $100s on a rack like a Fitness Reality 810 XLT, which is widely recommended as a low-end option at around $300, or a Rep PR 1100 for $360. But those are also both 14 gauge steel, so you'll probably outgrow them pretty quickly. And they're also not nearly as robust and easy to build off of. So what I would do is find your ideal base rack, see what it costs, and then add on all the attachments and stuff you might want later. So let's take a Rep PR 4000 as our base. Configured as a 4-post at 93 inches tall and 41 inches deep with some sandwich J-cups and some safety straps, it's gonna run you about $1,000 shipped. Now that's not the cheapest build even for that rack, but it will give you an idea of what a rack that's gonna outlive you will cost. So then I take that $1,000 and realize I have absolutely no spending control and I'm gonna spend $3,000 and boom, you've got a budget. Now just remember to factor in shipping, because unless it's free, it's probably pretty expensive. You also don't want to overlook who you're buying from, as this is debatably the most important and probably the most expensive piece of equipment you'll own. So while we all like to save money, be careful with this one. Stick to proven companies with a history of quality and service, but also look at build quality, material quality, packaging, service, and the company's warranty. That and bigger, more established companies tend to have a ton of attachments and ways to build off of that base rack. If you couldn't tell, I tend to over-research and probably over-examine things, but reading a few good reviews and finding a couple trustworthy opinions, it goes a long way. Or as always, ignore all that, trust me, and just use my affiliate links. Now let's take a quick look at some of my top picks for power racks. Now this is not a full list because we don't have 6 months for a single video, but rather if I had to pick 5 racks for most people, and maybe a few others, this is the list. It's not particularly surprising, but I will justify each. First, I'd start taking a look at the Rogue Infinity series, this rack right here. There's the R3, R4, and R6 with the number representing approximately the depth of the rack in feet. It's a 2x3 rack with 5/8 inch hardware and 11 gauge steel, and actually all the racks I'm about to talk about have 11 gauge steel, which makes them all heavy, strong, and stable. And this one has west side hole spacing. And if we applied logic to home gym rack selection, and we don't, it's about all anyone would ever need. I love this rack, but my only complaint about it is that there's a ton more options for customization and accessories with a 3x3 rack. So if you've got big dreams, you might want to step into the 3x3 world. And first, I'd look at a Rogue Monster Lite, which is a 3x3 rack with 5/8 inch hardware and west side hole spacing. If you want to go overboard with your rack, this is probably your first step. Now, I didn't say we needed to use logic in our rack selection. So if you don't want to go with an Infinity rack and you want to stick with Rogue, this is probably the first place you should look. This is a killer rack, and as long as you can get over that sticker shock, it's not a purchase you'll be regretting. Because it's a 3x3 rack, you'll be getting a ton more options for accessories, since this is the rack size Rogue and everyone else pushes and innovates with. If I were to rank high-end rack choices for most people, I would say this thing is number 1 or number 2. Next, I'd look at the Rep PR 4000, which is probably the sweet spot between price and quality. There's not a whole lot of things you can buy nowadays for a home gym where you feel like you got a good deal, but this is definitely one of them. We did a full video review of it here, and I can't say enough good about it. If not for the fact I've already reviewed it, this would probably be my next purchase. Essentially, it's a Rogue Monster Lite for less money, same size and spacing, and you can put a lot of other companies' attachments on it since it's also a 3x3 rack with 5/8 inch hardware. It's not made in America, the Rep is an American company, and it's the other rack I'd rank as number 1 or number 2 for most people as a high-end choice. Next, I'd look at a Rogue Monster rack. It's the kind of rack that'll outlast your marriage after you purchase it, and they call it a monster for a reason. It's a 3x3 rack with 1-inch hardware. It's everything we don't need, which is why it's on my and your list. It's overkill. It's big, heavy, and gorgeous. It really probably only belongs in commercial gyms, but it has a ton of attachments, so clearly it's a great choice for home gyms. But jokes aside, this thing is awesome, and it's worth a look for those truly dedicated souls with really supportive wives. Next, we have the Rep PR5000, essentially Rep's equivalent of the Rogue Monster Rack, a 3x3 rack with 1-inch hardware and 2-inch hole spacing. It's big, beefy, and beautiful, and it's well reviewed for a lot of reasons. Maybe the most important of which is it's less likely to shave years off your marriage with that price tag. If you balk at Rogue's prices but still like that logo and accessory quality, probably a good idea to take a look at this rack and see if you can throw some Rogue attachments on it. But just make sure they fit first. Admittedly, there's a lot of really good and really bad other options out there, but for the sake of my sanity and your time, those are my top 5 recommendations. But let's be honest, none of those were particularly cheap. So if you balk at all those prices, and that's fair, I'd look at more budget options from a company like Titan. They have the T-Series, which is like Rogue's Infinity Series, a 2x3 rack with 5/8-inch hardware. The X-Series, which is a 3x3 rack with 5/8-inch hardware. And the Titan Series, which is a 3x3 rack with 1-inch hardware. And honestly, Titan's build quality has come a long way over the years. And they definitely didn't pressure me to say that based on my history with them. And I feel completely safe here. So take a look at the article. It should probably only take me 4 months to finish. Like, comment, and subscribe to boost us on the algorithm. Thank you for the support. Hope this video is helpful. I'll see you next week.